So it was about 2 weeks ago when there was the 25th anniversary of your mandate as the OSCE, and you said that this is not a reason for a celebration given the current situation in the world and regarding media freedom. And you also said in your speech that we are facing an unprecedented regress in media freedom and a severe clamp down on independent reporting across the OSCE region. Could you elaborate on that, and
yes.
Could you point out some countries?
Yes, when this was my speech when I was presenting the report. I produced biannually a report that I present to the Permanent Council. The Permanent Council is the council of the representatives of the participating states, the ambassadors. And this was really my assessment regarding the period that I was reporting. We are this year, in fact, celebrating the 25th anniversary of my institution, the Representative on Freedom of the Media. And unfortunately, it's not really time to celebrate. No, we don't have the situation regarding media freedom and freedom of expression in the overall region. It's not very inspiring, it's not very encouraging. On the contrary, it's a dire one. We have quite a lot of problems in the region, but I hope that maybe next year the situation can improve a little bit. It's, let's hope. Let's also keep some hope that is possible to contribute to the improvement of the situation in the region. The problems are immense. We have new challenges, definitely. We have the challenges that are very much linked to the current crisis, the security crisis, the invasion of Ukraine, that raises a lot of issues. At the same time, this also has some positive aspects. If I do not want to be cynical, but I want also to raise the importance of freedom of expression and media freedom. Sometimes in these very, very challenging times, we can understand better how important media freedom is, how important is the role of journalists. If we had not imagined, we had not so many journalists bravely doing their job on the ground, we could not have information on what is going on, and this will have a terrible impact, not only in the mobilization of everyone regarding what is going on, not only in a way also, how should I say, promoting, reviving a sense of unity, a sense of urgency, of doing something regarding the terrible suffering that is happening there. But at the same time, they are playing an important role in collecting evidence for future accountability mechanisms and courts regarding possible violations, possible war crimes happening on the ground. So I think this crisis showed how important how important is the role of journalists, how important is media freedom. And this was, I would say the positive impact and awareness raising for us all to really look at these challenges as important, central in our societies, and also very important as contributors to peace and security, which in the end it's the agenda of the organization, OSCE as such.
But in moments when journalism is seen as essential, such as this moment, journalism is more under threat than usual, because we are talking about physical threats, because
Yes.
we're talking about the journalists who are covering the war in Ukraine, or we are talking about intimidation, which is a more subtle way of threats, and,
Yes.
and a
Yes.
manner which is kind of hard to prove.
I'm not saying, because it's quite evident, and it's quite visible. So I'm not so sure that it's hard to prove. Evidence is there about this kind of illegal harassment of journalists, and you know, we produced a report on legal harassment last year. And we'll continue to work on it. At the same time, we know that other organizations, EU, for example, is very much interested in legal harassment, is preparing a directive on SLAPS, which is this strategic lawsuits on public participation. So again, on this kind of legal harassment. So I think that there is awareness and acknowledgement that this is a problem, and this is sometimes a very powerful instrument to silence critical voices, that's for sure. So we need really to do something. And that's the reason why my institution is working on the issue. That is also, and back to the safety of journalists and the way we need to protect journalists. We are launching this year a project on safety of journalists for the reasons I just mentioned, and I just mentioned a few of the importance of journalists for our democracies, for our world. And this safety of journalists will be looked not only through the dimension of physical protection, physical safety, but from multiple dimensions, because we need legal safety, we need ensure proper conditions, working conditions for the journalists, we need technological conditions, so we need all these dimensions to allow journalists to carry out their important mission. And of course, one of the issues we'll look at very, very, very carefully will be precisely this legal harassment of journalists. The other issue that we'll include in this approach will be the situation of journalists in crisis situations, in conflict situations, because they in a way put under stress the way journalists can carry out their mission. So again, we try to not only to look at the importance of the profession in normal times, I would say. That is always very challenging for all the reasons, and especially because, you know, those that are constantly under the scrutiny of journalists, they tend to, to be very creative regarding the tools they use to silence journalists, to silence these voices that are very challenging for them. So yes, but at the same time to adapt our work to the new challenges like the war that we are now living in our region, or or the journalists that work in exile, because now we have this kind of situations, those journalists that has to leave their countries, how is it possible that they can continue to do their work, which of course is very important for us all.
When it comes to journalists who were killed in conflict areas, now in Ukraine, will they be regarded as a separate investigation, as a war crime, as a how will their case be regarded?
It's not up to us to. We are not a court. We are not an accountability mechanism to judge these cases. What we want to do with this, because my mandate, and I would like very much to explain in a simple way what is my mandate about. And of course, my mandate is to identify the violations by the participating states of the commitments in the media field, OSCE commitments in the media field, and at the same time also to provide guidance, to provide assistance for them to align their legal frameworks, their practices to those commitments. This is what we do, and that's when we have this kind of projects. In the end, is to provide assistance to the participating states, to offer them the tools they can use if they want, of course, to better address the challenges in this particular case related to the safety of journalists.
In the latest top made by Reporters Without Borders, Romania dropped 8 places. It's now 55th out of 180. And some of the problems that were underlined by the Reporters Without Borders were interference and blocking public information by public authorities regarding journalists. Now you met some Romanian officials. Did you address this problem? Could this problem be solved? Is there a way of solving it? Is there a way of communicating between journalists and public authorities?
Yes, this is. I'm not. It's not up to me to rank countries. Of course, it's up to RSF to do this kind of job. It's not. It's definitely not my responsibility. But access to information, it's an important component for the exercise of the right to freedom of expression. That's the reason why it's central to ensure that not only journalists but the public in general should be granted with a strong right to access information. It's a question of participation. It's a question of citizenry. So it's really crucial. Of course, I discussed the issue. I know that Romania have a legal framework regarding access to information. Sometimes the problem is not so much the legal framework. The legal framework is a very good one, but what we need is really to ensure that we have a proper implementation of a legal framework. And I would say that this is decisive. It's also a long-term learning for everyone, because sometimes public officials have the tendency to be very secretive regarding the policies, their practices. So I would say that this is a learning process for everyone. But definitely we need to make progress in all the participating states, I would say, regarding access to information. If you don't have information, citizens that are well informed, they cannot scrutinize the public officials, they cannot have a strong participation in public life. We cannot, as a whole, as a community, to have a strong democracy, and that's the reason why. Of course, sometimes it's difficult to, to provide this kind of information. It's to disclose some information, but in the end, it's a win-win process, definitely, and we need to learn also, it's a process as everything in this life.
You were talking about the legal framework, but sometimes investigation journalists in Romania especially say that they sent questions to public authorities, they didn't answer, and the last resort is to sue the public authorities. But journalism is a very fragile job. It's hard for them to afford a lawyer, and at the end of the trial, at the end when they have a verdict, maybe the information is no longer relevant.
Yes, I understand.
How do you?
Yes, I understand.
How do you handle
again?
this?
Again, I know that at least in the law, there is a kind of a fast lane for journalists, which is quite understandable because time is a very precious and scarce resource for the journalists. They have to work against time pressure. And sometimes the authority are not really aligned with this kind of urgency of the work of the journalists. I don't think that confrontation is the best way to proceed, because in the end everyone will be losing with this kind of processes. And what I'm trying to do myself is to persuade the authorities that it's very, very important to have this kind of openness and really to provide the information. Because if you don't provide the right information, you as a politician will be confronted with wrong information, with the one that it's not an accurate information. So it's better to control the process, to control with true, but to control the process. It's with reliable information, but this is human also to try sometimes. Okay, let's not. This can be dangerous. This can have a negative impact, and I also think that we need more platforms for the politicians and the journalists also to discuss, to understand. In a way to have more inclusive processes also in the implementation phase of the legal frameworks, not only during the legislative process, but also in the implementation phase of the legal frameworks. This is important. It's a win-win. I would say it's a win-win alliance. Even if sometimes it's difficult. It's difficult for the politicians. I have been in politics, so I know that it's not sometimes that easy, that it's a little bit difficult to be under the pressure of the journalists. But we need to understand and respect what the work they are doing and recognize the importance of the work they are doing. This is for the public good.
Whenever there's a debate between journalists who happen to be intimidated because they had certain investigations that were not pretty comfortable for the people in power, they always talk about how easy it is to ruin a journalist's reputation just like that. Are you taking this into consideration? Are you talking with authorities about this? Because it's very easy, bottom line, to spread lies about journalists and just erase everything they did.
Yes. Unfortunately, this is another. It's the kind of. It's not. Many times, it's not a question of legal harassment, but it's another kind of intimidation of the journalists, and of course this it creates a terrible pressure over the journalism. It's a very negative trend, and I do remember, every year all the freedom of expression mandate holders, they adopt of the multilateral system, of the global multilateral system, which includes the UN, the OSCE, the Organization of the American States, and also the African Commission. They adopt a joint declaration on a topic that they deem important in a certain point in time. And last year, the joint declaration was precisely on this kind of intimidation by the public officials, by the politicians regarding journalists, because this is important. We need to act responsibly as journalists and as politicians, and we cannot use this kind of intimidation. We cannot use a language to damage the reputation of a journalist, because it's not healthy, and it doesn't help our democratic societies in the end. So we need to be very careful, and politicians have the responsibility to refrain from this kind of practices that can really be very harmful for the journalists, and we see how harmful they are in many countries, in many participating states, and not only in the OSCE region but beyond the OSCE region. It creates a kind of how should I say, a very negative image of the journalists in general, and again is destroying their work as journalists, beyond the issue, the personal issue of one journalist, of the personal reputation, but it's the whole professional, it's the whole profession that it's in a way harmed by this kind of practices, and I think this is not it's not very responsible coming from the politicians. They have to be more careful.
Given the war in Ukraine, do you have any signals that in the context of the war, there are countries that will harden their policies regarding public information, saying that, no, this is national security, even though it might not be the case? And how will you tackle that? The hardening of
this is quite a crucial issue, and we have to be very careful. We need, of course, to make our democracies functional. We have to ensure the right balance between the security concerns and freedom of expression and media freedom. So it's very difficult again, but we need to also to avoid the temptation to say everything is secret, everything is security. Let's shrink the space for media. Let's shrink the space for the scrutiny of what we are doing. Let's shrink the space of information that really is of public interest. And this is very damaging in the end. And it's very damaging for us all. It's not only for the journalists. No, on the contrary, it's for the society as a whole. We need to have constantly this kind of scrutiny, and it's precisely in difficult situations, extreme situation, extreme crisis that we need to really to fight for the values, to fight for the principles, and be sure that we continue to respect them and we continue to protect them. I know it's difficult. We understand that there are serious concerns and they have to be looked at very carefully. It's a responsibility of the states to provide for our security. But at the same time, let's not put everything in this immense bag of security. Let's not make it a good excuse to avoid to inform the citizens properly.
And the last question, because you talk a lot about the need for security for women journalists.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about this? Because in Western countries, it's hardly an issue.
Oh
but
no, you're
women
wrong. No.
Okay.
No, it's an issue everywhere, unfortunately. It's an issue everywhere. And you know, the data from UNESCO, it's terrible regarding the harassment of women journalists. So we need to really to be very active regarding this topic, and we are. We have this soft jaw project, the safety of women journalists online, and we are now entering a second phase of this project. We are doing a lot of. We have now this. The resource guide where after you know a time of research we identify the good practices, we identify the stakeholders that we need to mobilize in order to address the implementation gap regarding the protection of women journalists. But this is an issue. It's an issue everywhere.
It's a global issue.
It's a global one, and we need really to be very careful when dealing with this problem. And why? Because if it's not only a question of, I would say, a moral imperative, an ethical imperative, but it's also a question of being an absurd to exclude half of the women that could be half of the people that could be journalists not to be there because they are women and they don't want to be harassed all the time. So we are really impacting very negatively pluralism, because an important part of society will be excluded from journalism. So we cannot accept it. So it will be terrible for pluralism, for diversity of voices. So this is very serious, and we'll continue to work on it.
And this is actually the last question, because we were talking about reputation before. Is it easier to erase the reputation of a woman journalist than to erase the reputation of a man journalist?
I don't know.
In your opinion?
I don't know.
Is this a threat also in?
Yes, it's a good question. I never thought about it. But maybe it's usually women are more exposed than men. It's easier to destroy the reputation of women, and we have seen it. There are very obvious cases. You know, the Nobel Prize Maria Ressa, she was really a target of a concerted harassment. You know, but now she is a laureate of the Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize. So, but maybe women are more exposed, and so it will be more difficult for them to regain their reputation. So yes, maybe. most probably, I would say.